Boston College may be done in the transfer portal, but they could still have one more spot to look at, and there's one glaring need that they need to address.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm the editor of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. So we got a busy episode today. We're going to talk about the transfer portal in football. One position I still think, even with limited spots, BC really should address. I'm going to also look at the recruiting cycle right now, and two names I think are just going to be absolutely crucial and where BC stands with both of them. And then we're going to end it off with Earl Grant's current predicament. Can he get himself to a good spot with the roster that he has and transfers he may have to bring in? We'll get into all of that on today's show. So let's kick it off. Transfer portal. You've seen, if you've been following along on Twitter, lots of teams, the Auburns, the Colorados, Florida States, even the Oregons, they've been very, very busy in the portal, adding depth pieces and starting pieces and glaring weaknesses to whatever they need. Boston College, since the end of spring practice, has done nothing. And there's a reason behind that. As I said on previous shows, their roster is pretty set. They only lost a handful of players to the portal. And after talking to some people within the program, they don't have much flexibility to go out to the portal. They have, they're up against their 85 number. So it looks like if they get anyone, it would have to be a special circumstance or a player that really fits something that they absolutely need. So you guys have been asking, right? Like linebacker, no, that's not going to fit it. They have enough depth at linebacker. They can handle the season with what they have. And given what they've had in the portal or what they've seen in the portal, linebacker shouldn't be it. Same thing with offensive guard. We just had Mitch on Monday, and we were talking about that. That the guys that BC has are probably better than the guys that they could get in the portal at that position. So that wouldn't be it. But the one position I still think they could address and get someone who could help this team is the edge rusher position. Now, I am not under the delusion that BC is going to go out there and get a game-changing edge rusher that's going to help them, with a premier pass rush. That's not going to happen. That right there is an unfair expectation. You're not going to get that. In the NIL market, edge rushers are one of the more expensive ones to get. They're looking at blue bloods, and all those programs are going to snipe them all up. And to be fair, you could look at your roster and say you have your two starting edges with Donovan Azaraku, who, if he plays to his potential, could be one of the best pass rushers in the ACC. But if he plays like last year, which he was good, it just wasn't as productive in terms of sacks. He's there, and you have Neto Paula, who you're just hoping the new staff can click to help him get his pass rush back up to an ACC level. But it's after that worries me. You look at the depth at edge, right? You have Edward Kalengi, who has played parts of 2 seasons now. So maybe he is a guy that they trust. Maybe he's a guy that's ready to take that next step and be your third edge rusher. And maybe he'll make some plays. He's done that in the past. He's had some decent games. But then after that, it's a whole bunch of question marks. You have Gilbert Tongrongu, who's been hurt and I believe was hurt again this spring. You have Clive Owen. We haven't seen him play much more than a few snaps here and there. You have Josiah Griffin. We have not seen. So either you're going to have to trust your young depth there because you have a lot of it, or you need to bring in a veteran. And I look back to 2020 as a prime example of the type of player that I think would actually work well with what Boston College needs. You're not going to, as I said, you're not going to get a slam dunk edge rusher. You're not going to, I don't think that's a real expectation. What you could look at is a guy that kind of fits in between like the Akpalas and then the Kalengi and below. And that player that they landed a long time ago was Max Roberts. Max Roberts was a under the radar recruit who came from Maine and immediately was a staple in the BC pass rush. He was there with Brandon Barlow and Marcus Valdez and Sheeta Salah. And, he wasn't asked to be a starter. He was a situational player. He came in a lot during pass rushing downs. And I believe he ended the season with like 5 or 6 sacks. 5 or 6 sacks would be a, a blessing for this team because I think BC ended last season with what, like 8.5. Think of that, right? Like you had Ezaraku and this other player that you could possibly get that could add. So just even say 3 or 4. That is an immediate improvement on your pass rush that gives you the jolt you need. So when you're looking for this, you don't need to go out there and get a by Joby who was coming from Michigan State and he was very highly sought after. Ended up at Kansas. You don't need to get a guy like him. Maybe you find an FCS level player. Maybe there's hidden gems out there that aren't going to be heavily recruited that can fit the needs of your roster that you can easily grab. And maybe it's not going to be you're not going to lead off a whole show on Locked On here talking about this player, but maybe when we come to the fall and you see him playing reasonable snaps and playing a role, so that that like Ezaraku, or maybe Paul is just not working in pass rush, you put this kid in on certain downs, then all of a sudden you're talking about a different situation here with your edge rushers. So it's all going to be based on what the staff thinks. If the staff thinks that they have the guys to do that, if they see Kalengi or Tongrongu or even Clive Wilson, who I've heard great things about, I just haven't seen him play enough. If they feel like those guys can step in day one and be part of a rotation where you're going to need to get guys out there, and God forbid if someone gets hurt, that position is scary thin, then you're going to be okay. But that's all based off the staff evaluation. Does Tim Lewis, does Bill O'Brien think that position is okay? But if they don't, maybe that's where they go into the transfer portal. But as I've said, it's going to be selective. It's, I based off of the scholarship crunches I've seen, and it's always variable. It's always hard to tell. There's always like little situations behind the scenes that makes it hard to gauge what number they're actually at. But from all accounts I've heard is that BC's like up against the 85. So they're going to have to be creative if they do it. So we haven't heard them um, by Joby was one name that I heard BC connected with. But as I've said on the show before, connecting with a recruit or a transfer and just saying, "Hey, how's it going?" Blah 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 doesn't mean actual interest on the kid's side or your side. It's just connecting with them, right? So like you see those lists on Twitter where it's like so and so's been connected by 25 schools and lists like every Power 5 school possible. I don't read into those. It's the ones that get deeper, the ones that there's either a visit or you're seeing much more connection there. Those are the players that BC has been connected with in earlier transfer portal iterations. I haven't seen any of that this spring. I feel like they are set. So better or worse, this is the roster they have. But as I said, I would still love to see them try to grab a edge rusher. So we'll see what happens. Now, in a moment, I want to get into recruiting. I got a couple thoughts I want to get into. We'll keep talking edge rushers because I have a thought about that. And then 2 names that I continue to hope and pray for the future of Boston College that they can land. We'll get into who those are, and I'll talk all about that in just a moment. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to lend your entire portfolio with confidence. Let's get straight to the point. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor. For me, I have my 401k, some of the stocks I have, all in one spot. I don't need to go looking around at all the different portfolios I have. It's all just there, and that makes life so much easier for me. It securely links your brokerage accounts for one unified view of your wealth, including 401ks and other investments. So, for comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com, the #1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black. And we're talking about edge rushers, and I'm going to get into recruiting in a minute, but I had a thought. And sometimes when I do my Locked On Boston College, my brain, it's never a straight arrow. It's always sometimes it waves and goes. And I was talking edge rushers, and I was like, you know what the readers and listeners would want to know more about is where recruiting stands at that position too, because it's very clear to me that this recruiting cycle, BC is looking to add edge, a handful of edge rushers because that has been a position that to me seems a priority target for Boston College. You look around all the new offers that the Bill O'Brien staff has made for the class of 2025, and a lot of them are defensive linemen, and many of them are edge rushers. So I feel hearing, I talk to the staff, I'm connected, I know what's going on. It seems to me that that's going to be a position that they're going to really emphasize in this recruiting class because they, as I just said in that last segment, the depth there is kind of wishy-washy, right? Like you've got guys that you don't know what you get out of them yet. They could be starters next year in 2026, or they may just not work out. We don't know yet because we haven't seen them play. But you don't have enough depth to play around with that yet. You're still building what you need there. So I see what Tim Lewis is doing. I see what Jeff Commission, the defensive line coach, is doing on the recruiting trail. And you got guys like Israel Oladala Papu out of Indiana, who's a defensive end. You got Tommy Rupley. You've got many, many names. I'm going to have a full big board of them up on Eagle Insider later. A big board, if you don't know what it is, it's kind of like draft talk, right? I know from, and this is me connecting with my sources within the program, who Boston College is going after. Who are the names that you really need to watch for? Because if you watch me on Twitter, I put up all the offers, but some of them never. The kids may not be interested. The staff is like just checking in with them. The real names, the ones you want to know about, are on my big boards on Eagle Insider. Those are the ones that I know from talking to people that they are very connected to BC. So you want to check those out. I have one up right now for wide receiver, running back, and I got to say I probably won't have one for quarterback because the staff from what this is a position that is very guarded right now within the staff. They don't want to talk about it. So that's okay. The name for quarterbacks that you're going to want to watch for, the one that I know of, and they're hiding it from me too, folks. Like I have to do my digging to see if I can figure it out from other ends. Is Mason Droop out of Wyoming, and he has offers from Oregon State and a few North Dakota State and a few other programs out west. He has not set his official visit date up yet. He's looking at it. I talked to him yesterday, and he's still trying to get his date set. But that's the one quarterback. But other positions, they're usually like 8 or 10 players long. So I got details on all of them. Come over to Eagle Inside, check those ones out. But the two names, and these are my two stars that I want to see Boston College land this cycle. And they're both local kids because, as we've said on the show, Bill O'Brien is emphasizing building that fence around New England. And to his credit, I have to say, I've been pretty impressed with what he's done so far in just 2 months, 3 months on the job. He's landed 4 or 5 kids from Massachusetts, which is what he said he wanted to do. And there's going to be players that go elsewhere, and it's going to happen. But there's clearly been a focus on building your roster around some of the kids from local schools, and so that's great. You got some nice players like Griffin Collins and Marcelino Antunes for class of 26, and Makai Amity from Zavarian Brothers, defensive lineman. You are there's two names though that are getting national attention that are gonna be the the point where you're watching and going, huh, that's where Bill O'Brien's oomph is kind of pushing through, right? And that is Hardy Watts from Dexter in Massachusetts. I think it's in Brookline, and Tommy Rupley from Belmont Hills. Tommy Rupley fits that edge rusher I was talking about earlier. Hardy Watts is an offensive lineman. Now, these two are nationally recruited players. If I was to gauge who BC has a better shot at, I would say Rupley is probably the better chance. They're both ranked around the same, though I think Hardy Watts is a little higher. But Watts's offer list it's scary good. I mean, as I said, I've said this before, like Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Auburn, Penn State, Michigan, Notre Dame, like you name the school, he's got it offered. But from sources I've talked to, they expect there's an expectation he's going to visit BC for an official visit. Now, we've had that happen. We've had guys, Gerby Lambert last year from Catholic Memorial, who did take an official visit to BC and ended up at Notre Dame. So you've seen local guys do this and then still go elsewhere. So that's where I'm very interested with that. Earl Grant, will Bill O'Brien be able to close the deals that Jeff Halfley couldn't close? And that's going to be a tough one. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. That's a tough recruitment, and the fact that they can get him on campus, given his offer list, is impressive in itself. Right? The fact that you're still in the running for this kid shows that Bill O'Brien has something going there. He visited it for his first time over the spring, which I it's crazy. Like I guess the previous staff maybe didn't have as much emphasis, or maybe he just did a unofficial and he just didn't tell me about it. But he's a tough one. The one that I think is going to be a fun one to watch is Tommy Rupley. To me, he's got official visits to like Duke, Northwestern, Penn State, BC. I think BC has a good chance at this one. This is one I think BC is going to close because I've heard from sources that there's a ton of bigger names at Penn State. Penn State, they're going to go for their elite blue chips, right? That there maybe not even a chance that he will have a spot on that roster. So I almost want to say that Penn State might honestly be eliminated. And it's going to probably come down to Penn State or BC. He was visits are important, but Rupley was on campus. So I went to a bunch of scrimmages. I was there for a lot of practice. He was there almost every time I was there. That shows me something. That's not just smoke there. There's fire. Like, just showing up on campus once is not a big deal. Showing up at campus and in the spring game is a little bit more telling. But the fact that he was there, like every visitor list I had up on Eagle Insider, especially on a Saturday, 4 or 5 times he was there. So there's clearly a big interest with this kid. He has, I believe, BC as one of his first visits, if I remember correctly. If that's the case, that would be one that I would watch to see if he pops right after his visit. Because especially if he knows that Penn State may not take him, it's a lot of time between now and then, and Penn State's going crazy with their recruiting. If that's the case, if maybe Penn State just he's not a priority anymore to Penn State, BC's making him a priority, which also should feel good to him. Like if he's a guy that they really, really want, then he may pop for BC. That would be a good one. And so if you were to ask me, like AJ, do you have for this recruiting class, getting both of these kids, is that the only way for this to be successful? I say no. I would say for this to be successful in the state of Massachusetts, BC needs to land one of two of these kids. If you land Rupley and you lose on Watts, you battled. It's hard. That you'd hope that you can land a kid like Watts, but as I said, he's got a lot going for him. It's going to be tough. Landing Rupley will really solidify what your class looks like in the state. And you still have spots that you could still fill with a few other local kids. There's still other local kids that you could get too, especially in the state of I'm talking like Connecticut too. Um, guys like Charles Bell and Jordan Houston of St. Thomas More in Connecticut, I know are very high, high on BC. They've been there a bunch of times. BC can really add and build a really good recruiting class, then go elsewhere for some of those other key parts. And I think you'll see that with Coach Daryl Wyatt with the wide receivers too. So and cornerbacks too. I want to give Ray Brown his credit because he's got some interesting names coming too. So just an update on recruiting, how I see the local recruits landing right now. In our final segment, I'm going to talk about basketball because it's in a tough spot right now. I want to look at where Earl Grant is at, and he's done magic before with some of his recruits and his transfers. But does he have enough magic left with what he has coming to campus? We'll talk all about that in just a moment. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 bets in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You're watching that Bruins and Panthers series. Were you thinking like I was that after that first game, the Bruins won, that Florida was going to come back and strike hard? Then, hey, if you went on there and took the money line or the spread, you'd be a happy person. And what about the Celtics? Celtics against the Cavs coming up. Game 2, Feel like the Celtics can continue that? Go over to FanDuel. They got it all. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel slash locked on and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black, wrapping things up here on today's Thursday episode. On tomorrow's show, we're going to wrap up all the news of the week. We'll talk football, we'll talk recruiting, we'll talk transfer portal, and everything in between. When speaking of transfer portal, because that's what everything is going on with right now, we are looking at basketball, who continue to have open spots on their roster after losing TJ Power to UVA, after losing some of their other targets that maybe they were just looking at. BC still has open spots, and the names that are floating for BC, the one that I floated, the kid from St. Francis University in Pennsylvania, Eli Wilborn, he committed to Duquesne, and all the signs for Chisholm Akpara of Harvard is he's going to end up somewhere else too. So that begs the question: what do? You have 2 more spots left, and I think I sense what's going to happen. And it's been an Earl Grant specialty since he's been here. Is expect to get a bunch of names that you've never heard of before. Every year he's been here, he's grabbed guys that have been, a bit of a work in progress. And to his credit, some of them have worked out nicely. I look at Quinton Post. Quinton Post was sitting on Mississippi State's bench, averaging what was like 2 points per game, and he left all ACC, right? I look at Devin McLaughlin, an under-recruited forward who came in, had to redshirt to get ready for the, to get up to college speed, and he left, averaging 10 points, 7 rebounds per game, and was an excellent defender. You look at guys all up and down that roster, he's hit and miss. There's been guys he's not been able to develop, and I'm going to give credit, I'm not going to give him credit for everything there, but that's been kind of his MO. Whether it's CJ Penna, it's, you look down at the roster of guys, and he's already done it with Josh Beadle. Josh Beadle is a guy that, was averaging like 3 points per game last year for Clemson. He hasn't done all that much. So I'm expecting that's going to be where it's coming from. And whether it's freshmen or transfers, that's going to be a question we're going to have to wait and see. It's not going to be exciting. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not expecting any of these additions to fill the roster to be like name catchers, like guys like, wow, like TJ Power, right? So the big question then is there enough talent on this roster for Earl Grant to coach up? Does he have enough can he squeeze and get more out of the guys he has? You're looking at guys like Chaz Kelly and Donald Hand and Jaden Hastings, who we haven't seen yet, but the other two, you're waiting for them to take that next step to become ACC level players. Is that the expectation? Is that he's going to be able to do that? And he may, but it's still a big question, right? You look at guys like Josh Beadle, like, is he from Clemson? Is he going to be a guy that can be a regular contributor? He hasn't done that yet, but he's a guy I've heard, from Clemson people, he's a popular player there. Maybe there's something he can kind of catch there. And then there's the mystery players, even when I say mystery players, I'm talking freshmen like Luca Taves and Nick Petronio. We don't know what they could bring. We don't know what these new, whoever they're going to fill these roster spots, they have to fill it in. We don't know what they're going to bring. Can he develop them into a winning program? I worry. As I said on an episode on the We Lost TJ Power episode, you can go back and listen to that one. There's a lot more questions than answers on this program right now. They don't have a go-to scorer. They don't have an established big man, Chad Venning, I guess, from St. Bonaventures. But you have to have a lot of faith in Earl Grant to believe that he can make them competitive again with the roster that they have right now. Could he do it? Sure could. Absolutely. I'm not going to doubt the man that he's brought the program along in his first 3 years. It just seems more likely to me that it's going to regress this year. And the frustrations in the transfer portal, the inability to get a player to change that get the momentum going again, is tough. It's a tough sell for your fan base too, who's been waiting to get like back into the saddle with like a big name. And it does not seem like it's going to happen. So that's going to wrap things up for today's episode. This is AJ Black. You can follow me on Twitter at AJ Black 247. Come over to Eagle Insider. I got a poll up right now. Speaking of, for next week, it's a readers in for you guys, listeners insight poll up on Eagle Insider. It's completely free. You can sign up. There's like 15 questions about BC football. I want to get your perspective. What do you think? Who do you think is going to be the leading receiver for this year? How many ACC wins are they going to get? What's the measure of success for this upcoming season? I need you to come over to Eagle Insider, and it does not cost you to sign up. Just go over there and take the poll, and we'll talk about the results on future episodes. It'll be a fun little exercise there. So thank you all for listening, and thank you for making Locked On Boston College your team every day.